From our first reading this morning, I wonder if you can recall what Jesus said to the homeless man. Well, what did Jesus say to the homeless man? Jesus said, "What is your name?" What is your name? It's that simple. Individuals experiencing homelessness can go weeks without someone calling them by name. Sometimes homeless people go by street names of their own choosing because it's one way that they can protect themselves. Too often, we treat people who are homeless like they are less than human. We ignore them. We avoid eye contact. We see their need and we pass by without saying a word. Asking someone their name and then calling them by the name of their choosing makes that person feel that someone cares. And it changes your perception of them. It humanizes them. Knowing a person's name makes you treat them as a person. They aren't the homeless. They are homeless people. Or better yet, they are people experiencing homelessness. This way, homelessness doesn't define them. They are defined by their personhood and their individuality. Now, from our second reading, perhaps you can recall that when the disciples wanted to find someone to blame for the plight of the blind man, Jesus told them to stop. It's so easy for people to get stuck on blame. The causes of desperate situations like homelessness are numerous. Yes, it may be the result of addiction, but there are many other significant factors. Lack of affordable housing, low wages, domestic violence, traumatic experiences, and lack of accessible mental health care. Last week, outside the supermarket, there was someone selling poppies, and the week before, there were a number of people with cans asking for donations for homeless veterans. As I drove home, that really disturbed me. You can risk your life to fight for your country, and yet you may find yourself homeless. And then there are women who have given up 10 or 12 years of their career to bring children up, and in later life their marriage falls apart and they find themselves homeless. It's so easy for us to jump to conclusions and to get stuck on blame. But the important thing to note in all of this is that what we are dealing with here are real human beings. I wish this morning to share with you two stories. The first is an imaginative story, and the second story is a real story, a story that happened only a couple of years ago here in Melbourne. But let's begin with the imaginative story. Imagine for a moment that the Church Council here has secured with ABC to host a Q&A session in the church hall. And the subject is homelessness. And they've managed to secure a special guest presenter. A fellow by the name of Jesus of Nazareth is going to present. So Jesus of Nazareth is hosting a Q&A session in the church's fellowship hall. A woman called Joan at the back of the room raises her hand. "Yes," Jesus says, pointing to the woman. "Do you think the government is obligated to give assistance to anyone who asks for it?" she says. "By public assistance," Jesus says, "do you mean help with the cost of living and housing?" "That's right," the woman says. Jesus nods with a thoughtful look in his face. "It sounds like you've given this question some thought," says Jesus. "What do you think?" Throats clear and a chair shuffles. "Well, obviously we have to help those who can't help themselves," Joan replies. "But you know, there's a lot of people out there who abuse the system." "I see," says Jesus. "So are you saying that not all of our neighbours deserve food and a place to live because of those who abuse the system?" "Well, not exactly, but what I mean is, are you saying that not all of our neighbours deserve assistance when they need it?" Jesus continues. "That it's okay for some families to live in the streets?" Joan glances to the left and the right, as if looking for help, and then she sighs. "It's just that we work so hard to pay our taxes," she says with conviction, "and it hurts to know that money can get into the wrong hands." Jesus speaks with curiosity more than conviction. "And so you're willing to penalise those who need help for the sake of the cheaters?" "But Jesus," Joan continues with signs of desperation showing in her voice, "we can't afford to support everyone who refuses to pull their own weight. It would break the system." A cheeky smile breaks out in Jesus' face. "With all the money still being spent, even now, on eating out, sport and recreation, I'd hardly say that Australia is too poor to feed and house the poor." The woman shrugs and shakes her head. "But what about all that tax money going to buy drugs and weapons? Nobody wants that happening." "Of course, you should use diligence to prevent that from happening, but don't penalise everyone," says Jesus. "Love will cover the messy bits." You might recall the time my disciples wanted to know whose fault it was that a man was born blind. As Jesus takes several steps closer, a dramatic hush comes over the room, and Jesus breaks into a huge smile, and the room seems to brighten. This blind man was a hopeless cause, Jesus says with a glowing expression. He had the face of a corpse, with those ugly, shrunken eye sockets, utterly hopeless. When the disciples wanted to find someone to blame, I told them to stop. It's so easy for people to get stuck on blame. And then I asked myself, what resources do I have on hand? And for a moment I thought, nothing. And then I felt the dirt under my toes, and I remembered playing in the mud when I was a child. I remembered making swallows that you could swear could fly. And so I spat in the dirt, reached down and mashed it all together. This was all spontaneous, mind you. It was a reckless idea. It was an idea that just popped into my head. I only hoped that people around didn't think I was totally insane. The way I saw it, it was a sacred offering for the man. I didn't have a cent, but I had mud. It was the most down-to-earth, ridiculous offering you could imagine. So I rubbed it in the blind man's eyes, and all of a sudden he could see. What an irrational, glorious, love-infused moment. Jesus' smile is contagious. You can't help but send it back to him. A man in the front row raises his hand, and Jesus acknowledges him. So what I hear you saying, says the man, is that we should give whatever we can, no matter how insignificant it seems, and God will multiply that gift? Exactly, Jesus says. And don't try to establish blame when people are hungry, sick, or homeless. When all your resources are gone, do whatever you can, and you will show the world, everyone around you, that God's extravagant love never balks at the lack of resources or impossible circumstances. So go out there and share your gifts with broken people. At this point, Jesus glances at his mobile phone. Oh, I do apologize to everyone, but my calendar is reminding me I have an appointment in Jakarta tomorrow. I hope you've enjoyed this time together as much as I have. Over coffee and snacks, Joan runs into her close friend Marion. Oh, it all sounds too simple to me, she confides in her friend. My mind is telling me I'm not obligated to help any old beggar in the streets. My mind is telling me exactly the same thing, replies Marion. At this point, Marion's partner, John, leans in and offers his unsolicited advice. Then maybe, ladies, it's about time we all started listening to our heart, he says, with glaring eyes. Unable to endure his expression, Joan lowers her eyes and stirs more sugar into her coffee. Let us just take a few moments. I now want to share with you a story that occurred in Melbourne a couple of years ago. The story is about James and his Aunt Emma. James is a 12-year-old boy who lives in South Yarra. His father is an investment banker and his mother a corporate lawyer. Needless to say, the family is very money conscious. James saves his pocket money and his birthday money, and has even learnt quite a bit about investing in the stock market. It was around Christmas time and James wanted to go Christmas shopping. No one was available, they were all too busy. But his aunt was available, his Aunt Emma, who is a human rights lawyer. She was available. And so she took him in the car, and she parked the car in the car park, and they made their way to a shopping strip. And on the way to the shopping strip, they encountered a person who was homeless. Now, it's how Emma responded that is interesting. Emma took James by the hand, and they both crouched down to speak to the man who was homeless. Emma said to the man, "I'm Emma, and this is James. May I ask your name?" And the man responded, "My name is John." Emma then went on to ask John, "Please, will you let us do something for you this morning? How about a cup of tea or coffee and something to eat?" And so it was decided that John requested a mug of coffee with 2 sugars and a breakfast roll. So Emma and James went off to collect the food and drink, and they returned to John. They gave him the food and the drink, and then Emma then gave him a note from her wallet, telling John, the homeless person, how sorry she was about his situation and hoping that things would improve for him. Emma and James then set off again towards the shops, and they'd almost reached the first shop when James informed Emma that he had forgotten something and he would need to go back. So she said she'd wait for him where they were. Slowly, she made her way back, and after a while, Emma and James met up. And what Emma discovered was that James, the 12-year-old boy, had given half his Christmas money to John, the homeless person. James told Emma that he felt John's need was greater and that his family could make do with less expensive presents. Emma affirmed what Emma affirmed what James had done. And she told James that some people are reluctant to give money to homeless people. And she asked him why. And James responded, some of them may think that the person will spend it in drugs and alcohol, but I prefer to give the person the benefit of the doubt. Emma then responded. Emma is not only a human rights lawyer, but an academic, and she told James about research carried out in Canada and America by universities there, where the vast majority of homeless people use the money wisely. How do I know about this story? James's little sister, Maddie, told Grandma, "I'm impressed by James's action. I'm thankful for Emma's teaching, and I'm thrilled that Maddie felt the story was worth telling to her grandma." I'd like to close with a couple of quotes from a Catholic sister working in America with homeless people. "Homelessness is the canary in the mine. It's a prophetic call to all of us that there's something radically wrong in our society if anyone is living on our streets. That's by Sister Mary Scullion. And our final quote, "When I walk past someone in the street, it's not, there but for the grace of God go I, but there go I."